The day was supposed to feel warm and special, but something felt off the moment the evening began. The house was loud, yet empty in a strange way. Smiles didn't reach anyone's eyes. The table was set, food laid out, but there was no joy in the room. She tried to brush off the uneasy feeling, telling herself she was overthinking. It was her birthday, after all. As everyone sat down, the tension grew heavier. Small comments turned sharp. Jokes carried an edge that cut deep. What should have been kind words slowly became complaints. She listened quietly as every mistake she had ever made was brought up like a list prepared in advance. Nothing she had done was enough. Nothing she had given mattered anymore. Then came the words that shattered her. She was told she had always taken too much, asked for too much, and given too little in return. She was called a burden. The people who were supposed to protect her spoke as if she was an inconvenience they were finally tired of carrying. The room felt smaller with every sentence, the walls closing in as laughter followed the cruelty. Her chest tightened, but she stayed still. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't beg. She didn't try to defend herself. Deep inside, something broke, but something else formed in its place. A quiet strength, born from disbelief and pain, settled in her heart. When she was told to leave, there was no hesitation in their voices. No regret. No pause. Just a door being opened and a clear message being sent. She stood up slowly, her hands shaking, and looked around the room one last time. Faces that once felt familiar now looked cold and distant. She walked out into the night with nothing but her bag and her thoughts. The air outside was sharp, but it helped her breathe again. Tears finally fell, not because she was weak, but because she had loved deeply and been discarded without mercy. As she moved forward, each step felt heavier than the last. Yet beneath the heartbreak, a promise quietly formed. She would not let this moment define her as broken. She would not return in anger or desperation. Whatever came next would be done calmly, carefully, and on her own terms. That night ended something old, but it also marked the beginning of a new chapter, one where she would no longer beg for a place at a table that never truly wanted her there. The streets were almost empty as she kept walking, her footsteps slow and uneven. The city lights felt distant, like they belonged to another life. Her mind replayed the scene again and again, not because she wanted to remember it, but because her heart couldn't understand how everything had changed so suddenly. The silence around her was heavy, yet it gave her space to think clearly for the first time in a long while. As she walked, memories surfaced one by one. Late nights spent worrying about unpaid bills, times when she quietly covered expenses so the house could stay peaceful. She remembered working extra hours without telling anyone, just to make sure things didn't fall apart. No one had asked her to do it, but she had done it anyway, believing that family meant stepping up without being noticed. Her thoughts shifted to her sister. She remembered helping with school fees, books, and small comforts, always telling herself it was temporary. She believed that support would be returned one day in kindness or respect. She also remembered being the listener, the one who stayed calm during arguments, the one who carried everyone's stress without complaint. Standing under a streetlight, she stopped for a moment and took a deep breath. A strange calm settled over her. The anger was there, but it didn't control her. She understood something important in that moment: reacting loudly would only give them satisfaction. She refused to let her pain become entertainment for anyone else. She made a quiet promise to herself. She would not beg. She would not argue. She would not try to prove her worth with words. Whatever she did next would be done silently, with patience and purpose. Not to hurt anyone directly, but to build a life so solid that no one could take it from her again. The next few days were difficult, but she stayed focused. She found a small apartment, nothing fancy, just clean and quiet. The space was empty, but it felt safe. For the first time, every decision was hers alone. No opinions. No judgment. No conditions. As she unpacked her few belongings, she felt a sense of control returning. This place wasn't just a roof over her head, it was a starting point. She didn't know exactly where the path would lead, but she knew one thing for sure: she would never allow herself to be treated as disposable again. The change didn't happen overnight, but small wins slowly added up. Olivia applied for jobs without telling anyone, keeping her plans to herself. After several interviews, she was offered a position at a small law firm that handled private clients and quiet cases. The office wasn't flashy, but it was professional and respectful. From the first day, she felt something different there. She felt seen. That was where she met Daniel. He wasn't loud or overly friendly, but he paid attention. He noticed how carefully she worked, how she stayed late without being asked, and how quickly she learned. Instead of criticizing, he explained things patiently. Instead of taking credit, he gave it to her when she earned it. For the first time in a long while, someone believed in her without conditions. Weeks turned into months. Olivia learned how to manage her money better, how to plan ahead, and how to rely on herself. Each paycheck felt like proof that she was capable. She paid her rent on time, cooked her own meals, and built a routine that brought her peace. The fear of failing slowly faded, replaced by quiet confidence. She didn't brag. She didn't announce her progress. Her growth happened in silence. New clothes replaced worn ones. Stress lines on her face softened. She carried herself differently now, not proud, but steady. She stopped questioning her value and started trusting her instincts. Daniel began giving her more responsibility. He challenged her in ways that made her stronger, not smaller. When she doubted herself, he reminded her of her skills, not her past. Those moments mattered more than praise ever could. They helped her rebuild something she had lost long before that birthday: belief in herself. Somewhere along the way, word reached her family. A distant relative mentioned she had found work. Someone else said she seemed fine. But those comments were brushed off quickly. They assumed she was pretending. In their minds, she was still the same person they had dismissed, barely holding on, waiting to crawl back. Olivia never corrected them. She didn't need to. Their opinions no longer shaped her reality. While they underestimated her, she continued moving forward, step by step, building a life that didn't depend on approval or permission. Each day added another layer of strength. She wasn't chasing revenge yet. She was focused on something more important: becoming someone who could never be broken that way again. And without realizing it, she was already far ahead of the people who thought she had fallen behind. The invitation arrived unexpectedly, slipped into her mail without much attention. It was for a charity auction hosted downtown, the kind of event where quiet deals were made behind polite smiles. Olivia almost ignored it, but something told her to go. Not out of curiosity, but out of readiness. She felt steady enough now to step into spaces that once felt intimidating. The room was filled with soft music and careful conversations. People spoke in low voices, confident and controlled. Olivia blended in easily, listening more than speaking. As the auction began, one listing caught her attention immediately: an investment property with strong long-term value. She recognized it at once. This was the same opportunity her father had talked about years ago, the one he claimed would secure his future. She stayed calm. No rush. No visible reaction. When bidding opened, she waited. Others raised their paddles quickly, eager to impress. Olivia joined in quietly, her movements small and precise. Each bid was placed with intention, never emotion. She didn't look around. She didn't smile. She simply stayed focused. As the numbers climbed, fewer people remained in the race. One by one, they dropped out. When the final call came, the room fell silent. The winning bid belonged to Olivia. No applause. No spotlight. Just a simple confirmation and a nod from the host. She felt something shift inside her, not excitement, not pride, but clarity. There was power in this moment, and it wasn't loud. It didn't need witnesses. She had achieved something meaningful without stepping on anyone publicly or proving anything out loud. Later, as she signed the paperwork, the weight of it settled in. She had secured something her father wanted, not out of spite, but out of patience. He had dismissed her ability to succeed. Now, without him knowing, she had moved past him in ways he never expected. Walking out of the building, Olivia felt lighter than she had in years. There was no urge to call anyone. No desire to confront. She realized then that anger would have burned out quickly. Strategy lasted longer. Silence carried more impact. This wasn't about winning against someone else. It was about choosing control over chaos. She understood now that reacting loudly would only tie her to the past. Moving carefully allowed her to shape the future. As she drove home, the city lights reflected softly on the windshield. She wasn't smiling, but she was at peace. This moment didn't change who she was, it confirmed who she had become. Calm. Aware. Unreachable. For the first time since everything fell apart, she felt certain. Not because someone lost, but because she no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. The real victory was knowing she could move forward quietly, and still win. The room was crowded with professionals exchanging cards and polite smiles. Olivia moved through the space calmly, listening more than speaking, comfortable in her own place. She hadn't expected to see anyone familiar there, so when she heard her name spoken sharply, she paused. Cassie stood a few steps away, dressed sharply and smiling with confidence that felt rehearsed. Her eyes scanned Olivia from head to toe, clearly surprised. After a brief pause, Cassie's smile widened, not with warmth, but with pride. She immediately began talking about her job, her projects, her busy schedule. Every sentence carried the same message: she was doing well, and she wanted it to be noticed. Olivia listened without interrupting. She nodded politely, keeping her expression neutral. Cassie spoke quickly, listing achievements that sounded important but felt shallow. She talked as if success were a performance, something that needed an audience. Olivia didn't correct her or compete. She simply let Cassie talk. When there was a pause, Olivia responded calmly. She mentioned being involved in a few projects, nothing detailed, nothing dramatic. She spoke lightly about upcoming opportunities, partnerships that required discretion, and decisions that were still being finalized. Her tone was relaxed, almost casual. Cassie's confidence flickered for a moment. She asked questions, trying to sound curious rather than concerned. Olivia answered just enough to be clear without giving anything away. She referenced connections, rooms Cassie hadn't entered yet, and plans that hinted at influence rather than ambition. The shift was subtle but noticeable. Cassie's posture stiffened. Her smile tightened. For the first time, she wasn't leading the conversation. She tried to steer it back to herself, but the rhythm had changed. Olivia didn't push. She didn't boast. She simply remained calm, grounded, and self-assured. Other people joined the conversation briefly, drawn in by the ease with which Olivia spoke. Cassie faded into the background, no longer the center. Olivia excused herself politely, wishing her sister well before walking away. As she moved through the room, Olivia felt no rush of victory. There was no satisfaction in seeing doubt form on Cassie's face. What she felt instead was distance. Emotional distance. The kind that comes from outgrowing someone without trying to. Cassie watched her leave, unsettled. For the first time, she realized she didn't fully understand where Olivia stood anymore. And that uncertainty stayed with her long after the event ended. Olivia, on the other hand, didn't look back. She had said enough. Sometimes the most powerful message is the one delivered quietly, without effort, leaving the other person to fill in the silence on their own. The truth reached them slowly, not through her, but through quiet conversations and passing remarks. A former business contact mentioned a new boutique operation in a prime location. Someone else added Olivia's name, almost casually, as if it were common knowledge. At first, her parents didn't believe it. They assumed it was a misunderstanding or an exaggeration. Curiosity turned into concern. Richard looked into it himself and found the records. The property was real. The business was active. Everything was registered under Olivia's name. There was no mistake. The realization hit harder than anger ever could. She hadn't just survived without them, she had succeeded. Linda struggled to process it. She remembered the way Olivia had been spoken to, the dismissal, the lack of patience. She remembered how easily they had pushed her aside, convinced she would fail on her own. Now that belief had collapsed. The success they were looking at stood in direct contrast to how little faith they had shown. They decided to visit, telling themselves it was support, maybe even pride. When they arrived, the place was calm and well-run. Clients moved in and out with quiet respect. Olivia handled everything with ease. She noticed her parents immediately but didn't rush toward them. There was no excitement in her expression, only acknowledgement. They tried to speak warmly, asking questions, offering compliments that came too late. Olivia responded politely, professionally, as she would with anyone else. There were no personal details shared, no invitation to reconnect. Her attention stayed on her work. Richard felt the distance sharply. He expected resentment or anger, something he could respond to. Instead, he was met with calm indifference. Linda searched Olivia's face for familiarity but found only composure. The daughter they once controlled no longer needed their approval. As they stood there, it became clear what this moment truly showed. Olivia hadn't been weak. She had been patient. She hadn't been dependent. She had been generous. The coldness they once justified now reflected back at them, undeniable. There were no apologies offered, no emotional scenes. Olivia didn't demand recognition or express hurt. She simply carried on, steady and focused. That silence said more than any argument could have. When they finally left, the regret settled in. Not dramatic or loud, but heavy. They had underestimated her, dismissed her value, and now had to live with the outcome. Olivia didn't look back as they walked away. She returned to her work, grounded and unmoved. In that moment, her success wasn't just about business. It was proof. Proof that strength can grow in silence, and that love withheld leaves a mark that success alone cannot erase. The request came indirectly. A colleague mentioned Cassie was desperate to land a major client, someone influential who could change her position at work. Olivia listened without reacting. She already knew the client being discussed. He was known for being demanding, unpredictable, and unforgiving of mistakes. Most people avoided him for a reason. Olivia didn't hesitate when asked if she could make an introduction. She agreed calmly, without excitement or warning. There was no malice in her voice, no hint of what was coming. She passed along the contact, framed it as an opportunity, and stepped back. Cassie was thrilled. She bragged quietly to those around her, convinced this was her breakthrough moment. She prepared quickly, confident that charm alone would carry her through. What she didn't prepare for was pressure. The client challenged everything. He asked detailed questions, demanded clear answers, and changed expectations without notice. Cassie struggled to keep up. Small mistakes turned into visible gaps in her ability. Meetings became tense. Deadlines were missed. Excuses replaced results. Word spread slowly. Not gossip, but observation. Colleagues noticed the strain. Supervisors took note. Cassie's confidence began to crack as the client grew impatient. Eventually, the partnership ended, not with drama, but with disappointment. Olivia watched from a distance. She didn't interfere. She didn't defend or explain. When asked, she remained neutral, saying only that some opportunities require more preparation than others. Her reputation stayed intact, untouched by the situation. Cassie felt the shift immediately. Invitations slowed. Trust faded. People stopped praising and started questioning. The fall wasn't loud, but it was undeniable. She tried to understand what went wrong, but the answer was simple: she had been exposed. There was no confrontation between the sisters. No accusations. No explanations. Olivia didn't reach out. She didn't celebrate. She carried on with her work, steady and composed. The moment held a quiet symmetry. Olivia had once been underestimated, dismissed without care. Now Cassie faced the weight of her own limitations, revealed not through cruelty, but through reality. For Olivia, there was no sense of victory. Only closure. What had been taken from her was never returned, but something else had been restored. Balance. She understood now that revenge didn't always need words or scenes. Sometimes, letting people face the truth on their own was enough. And in that silence, the past finally loosened its grip. They reached out asking to meet, saying it had been a long time and they wanted to talk. Olivia agreed without hesitation. Not because she missed them, but because she no longer feared the conversation. They chose a quiet place, neutral and calm, where no one held power over the other. When they arrived, her parents looked older somehow. Their voices were softer than she remembered. They spoke about missing her, about thinking of her often. They said mistakes were made, that words had gone too far. They framed the past as something unclear, something shaped by stress and misunderstanding. Olivia listened without interrupting. Her face remained relaxed, her posture open. Inside, she noticed every carefully chosen phrase. There were no clear apologies, only regret shaped to avoid responsibility. They talked about family, about forgiveness, about starting over as if nothing had broken in the first place. When they paused, waiting for her response, Olivia didn't rush. She took a moment, not for drama, but for honesty. Her voice was steady when she spoke. She said she understood they felt differently now. She acknowledged their feelings without agreeing with them. Then she said something simple, something they hadn't expected. She told them she had built her life on her own. That the distance they created had forced her to learn how strong she could be. She explained that she no longer made decisions based on approval or fear. Not out of bitterness, but out of growth. They tried to reassure her, offering support, suggesting they could help now. Olivia shook her head gently. She said she didn't need help anymore. That she had already faced the hardest part alone. She wasn't angry, and she wasn't asking for anything. She was simply clear. The silence that followed was heavy. Her parents realized then that they weren't being invited back into her life the way they imagined. There was no argument to win, no forgiveness to claim. Olivia wasn't closing a door in anger. She had already walked past it. She stood to leave, thanking them for the conversation. There was no promise of another meeting. No emotional goodbye. Just a calm ending. As she walked away, she felt light. Not relieved, not victorious, just free. She had spoken her truth without raising her voice. She had faced the past without being pulled back into it. For the first time, the balance was clear. She no longer needed to explain herself. She no longer needed their understanding to move forward. What she had built stood on its own, and so did she. The evening was calm and warm, filled with soft light and gentle laughter. Olivia stood in her home, looking around at the small gathering she had put together herself. There were no grand decorations or big plans, just simple touches that felt personal. A few candles, food she enjoyed, music playing low in the background. It was enough. The people around her weren't there out of obligation. They came because they wanted to be there. Friends she had met through work, colleagues who respected her, people who listened when she spoke. Their presence felt easy, natural. There was no tension in the room, no need to explain herself or prove anything. As the night moved on, conversations flowed freely. Laughter came without effort. Olivia noticed how different this felt from the past. No one criticized her choices. No one measured her worth. She felt accepted for who she was, not what she could give. At one point, she stepped away for a moment, standing near the window and watching the city lights outside. Her thoughts drifted quietly. She reflected on how far she had come, not in achievements, but in strength. The pain she once carried had shaped her, but it hadn't hardened her. It had taught her boundaries, patience, and self-respect. She realized something important then. What she felt in that moment wasn't relief, it was joy. Real joy. The kind that doesn't come from winning or proving someone wrong. It came from knowing she was safe, capable, and whole on her own. Someone called her back to the group, handing her a small cake with a single candle. As she closed her eyes and made a wish, she didn't think about the past. She didn't wish for apologies or recognition. She wished for peace, and she already had it. When the night ended and everyone left, Olivia cleaned up slowly, smiling to herself. The quiet that followed wasn't lonely. It was comforting. She sat down, feeling grounded in a way she never had before. She understood now that survival wasn't just about getting through hardship. It was about choosing better for yourself afterward. Independence had given her freedom, and freedom had given her happiness. And in that quiet victory, she found something far sweeter than revenge, she found herself. The paperwork was completed without ceremony. Olivia reviewed each page carefully, signed her name, and handed the documents back across the desk. The transaction was final. The property that once held so many memories, some warm, some painful, now belonged to her. There was no announcement, no message sent, no reason to share the news. What mattered was the certainty of it. She visited the place alone. The building stood quietly, unchanged on the outside, but its meaning had shifted. She walked through the rooms slowly, noticing details she had once ignored. The space no longer carried weight. It was simply a structure now, no longer tied to control or expectation. Standing there, she thought about the version of herself that once felt small inside these walls. The doubt. The pressure. The constant need to be enough. None of it followed her anymore. She felt no urge to confront anyone about what she had done. This moment wasn't about proving a point. It was about closure. There was no anger left to release. No regret to process. Just a steady sense of strength. She had survived being pushed away and learned how to stand without support. That lesson stayed with her, shaping every choice she made. When she stepped outside, she locked the door gently. Not as an act of defiance, but as an ending. Some doors are meant to be closed so others can open fully. Her life ahead felt wide and clear. She had work she cared about, people who respected her, and a sense of peace that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. She didn't need to look back again. The past had already given her what it could. As she walked away, the future felt steady beneath her feet. Not perfect, not guaranteed, but hers. And for the first time, that was more than enough.